like the clock it hits again. Money flows like power through this vein. Frack put his ass to work, make it pay. Killing dreams in a high-tech LA.
So I do love the fact that I was hanging out at Digital Wildcatters / Collide for 3 years before I actually got a job.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You made it a long time.
That was a long internship, apprenticeship.
You tried fighting the inevitable as long as you could. You know what's funny? I think people appreciate this, but Chuck's been working without a salary for a while now. And Chuck was like, hey, look, someday, I'll probably want to get paid, but right now I don't want a salary because I don't want to be told what to do. Like, I don't want to have to come to the leadership meeting and all this. And you still do it anyways, but you're just like, I don't want to be told to do it.
Fair enough. The the serious side of that is at the end of the day, we just have to go raise money. I mean, that's just part of being a VC backed company and all. And
yeah,
if paying me takes a month off our runway, that doesn't do me any good.
Yeah.
No, so
for sure. Yeah. Well, we got you on health insurance now.
Yeah, we do.
We're making,
and it's pretty good health insurance.
Yeah, we got good health insurance.
I went to the ENT the other day, and no, way too much information here. Went to the urologist the other day, and
just go back to the ENT.
And they put me on testosterone. I've become the old man, and
yeah, we got you testosterone.
And I'm going to go ahead and give you this for you to beat me over the head with it. Yates males historically have always been low testosterone. My doctor's like, I don't treat numbers though. I treat patients, and so finally I went on testosterone, and the insurance actually pays for it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
we should do an episode where we analyze your hormone levels and optimize you.
Yeah,
you should do like a 6-month program because you're on creatine now.
I'm on creatine. You've got me broing out.
You're gonna be a beast here in 6 months.
Exactly. So do this. I think a lot of people have heard, but tell people what we're doing now at Collide, because I still bump into people that are like, hey, the podcast and when's Energy Tech Night? And
that's a hell of a transition to go from testosterone to what we're doing with Collide.
Don't forget the urologist.
Yeah, I think it's good to actually take a step back, especially for people that have followed us along the journey, with Digital Wildcatters. It's actually cool. I had a friend text me this morning and like, man, I was looking through my calendar for something old and I found this meeting invite from 2020 coming to talk to you. And you were telling me about the initial ideas for what became Collide. And it's just cool seeing it come to fruition because we have been working on this for a long time. But, back around 2020 started, it all kind of starts with a great crew change. We had this bimodal distribution of age in the workforce. You had boomers and millennials and not a lot of Gen X in between. And so this created...
For the record, I am Gen X. I made it by 3 years. I'm not a boomer.
Chuck is one of the few Gen Xers in oil and gas. And this opened up a few, I'd say, problems and opportunity sets. And one of those problems was that the industry operated off of legacy software that was developed in the 90s and 2000s. You go to conferences and people would be showing off their software solutions and they just looked old. And you contrast this to what was happening in Silicon Valley. It's just like, the industry was always 10 years behind in digital software. And so you started seeing these oil and gas tech startups start popping up. And that's when we started the podcast back in 2018, the Oil and Gas Startups podcast. And really we're trying to fill that void because there was no community or platform for tech companies in the industry. And obviously, we were really successful in that and built community around the Oil and Gas Startups podcast and Digital Wildcatters and just building community of people that wanted to change the industry. And around 2020, 2021 is when I started getting the idea for what is now Collide. And a couple of different reasons for starting it, but the main one that I saw was that there wasn't a place on the internet for oil and gas professionals to hang out. So you had LinkedIn. LinkedIn sucks. Everyone hates it. The majority of the industry is not on LinkedIn. You had little pockets on other social media platforms like Reddit and Facebook and Twitter. You had Energy FinTwit growing over on Twitter. And one day I saw an engineer get on Twitter and make a post, and he said, hey, I have a lot of iron carbonate buildup in my saltwater disposal well. Does anyone know why that is? 2 other engineers come in and give really technical, valuable answers. And then 2 days later, that information was just lost into the ether. And that was really the catalyst. It was like, hey, why don't we have a community knowledge sharing platform where engineers and ops can come, ask questions, share information, build their network. And, some we'll index all those conversations, and we'll be able to query those and use those in the future. And, there's a platform that I took a lot of inspiration from, which is called Stack Overflow. And Stack Overflow is used in the software engineering world. And you go there, you ask a question about your code, the community would answer it, and then Stack Overflow would index those answers. So the next time someone had a question, they could ask that question.
Well, and be specific on that. It's like a Microsoft engineer will hand a Google engineer some code.
Yeah.
I mean, that open source.
Yeah, the tech industry is so much further ahead than oil and gas when it comes to collaboration and an open source mindset. And so took that and was really inspired by it. And so we started building out that part of the platform, the community knowledge sharing platform, which sometime you and I should record a podcast on like how many iterations that took and like failures. It took us 3 times of launching it to gain any traction, and that's just.
I always say shittiest, shittier, shitty.
Yeah,
those are the previous 3 versions.
That's the progression. And the whole idea is, I remember, Chuck. I remember a conversation with you. I mean, this is back in like 2022. And you're like, man, there's a story. We're going to be doing all this with AI. And I was like, hold on. We're not doing that stuff with AI yet. But that was always the vision, is that, hey, we're going to be able to take information and be able to find it and access it with AI. And, we've been using AI for a while in the business. All the way back in 2018, we're using AI to transcribe our podcasts. And, everyone wanted transcriptions or blogs. And back then, the only way to do it was to pay people to do it. And you had like services. I think one of them was called like Rev writing or something like that, where you could pay like $1 a minute to get transcription. And essentially what they do is they just hire teams in India and have them sit there and manually transcribe it. We started using AI, and back then it just wasn't good. It wasn't accurate. It was about 70% accurate. It was expensive. And so a joke I always like to tell is like in our podcast, every time we mention Anadarko in the transcript, it would be Banana Darko. And so I just have Banana Darko imprinted in my brain. But when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, I saw a couple of different things that were about to happen. The first was that immediately I saw that the way that content and data, how it was structured around the internet, was about to change forever. These models were really good at answering questions about coding because it had siphoned all of the data from Stack Overflow's community and trained on that. It had taken all the content from Twitter and Reddit. And so immediately I was like, look, these companies are going to get extremely strict with API access. Like that is their data. That's what's, special to their platform. It's like search is going to change. Google search business is potentially at risk, and all the people that depend on search are going to be at risk because traffic's not going to come to those websites anymore, those blogs, things of this nature. So just saw that the way that data and content was structured around the internet was going to change. And then the thing with large language models being used at the enterprise level was that they just couldn't be used. And there's several different reasons. Back then they were really good at generating an answer, but they didn't have any transparency. They were a black box. They couldn't tell you how that answer was generated or what the source content was. You had problems with hallucinations. We still have problems with hallucinations today. You had problems with data security and privacy. And so I started really researching, and a couple of years ago found a technology called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And RAG is this framework that uses large language models. But what I really liked about RAG was, we can cite sources to our answers, and we can also give instructions and tune models to say, I don't know, when they aren't able to access information to answer that. And that's something that was super acceptable in oil and gas, to return an answer and say, I don't know, instead of hallucinating and giving some bullshit answer. And so we started building out our version 1 of...
I always talk about RAG is it's providing context and in effect some rules for the interaction with that foundational model.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way to think about it. That's what I liked about it, was we could essentially set parameters of hey, you need to access this information. You only answer a question if you have confidence in the information that you're sourcing, things of that nature. And so built out the first version of Collide AI, which was an energy specific RAG. And our sources of content for that first public version were, hey, we're going to take public information that's out there. So think energy related podcasts, blogs, articles, earnings reports, things of that nature. If it's in the public sphere, boom, we're going to scrape that and bring it in. Then you had second source, which was third party data and content. So we went and got deals with Society of Petroleum Engineers on their abstracts, Society of Exploration Geophysicists on their white papers. And then the third source would be the conversations that happen within the Collide community forums. And so you could think, someone would ask a question, hey, I'm having issues with this electric submergible pump and 4.5-inch casing. Collide AI would give you an answer, and then it would cite its sources. And the sources may be a book, it may be an SPE paper, or it may be a conversation between two production engineers that happened in Collide. And so we started building that. And what ended up happening is we took that augmented search technology and started deploying it into EMPs and OFS companies on their proprietary data. And you go back to that generational great crew change in the industry operating off of legacy software. So data lives in all of these legacy software systems, and then the majority of it actually lives in CSVs and PDFs. And so oil and gas engineers and operations teams spend 30 to 40% of their time just searching for information to use in their daily workflows. So the whole idea for us coming into these EMPs and OFS companies was, hey, we're going to take all of your data, we're going to take all your PDFs, all your CSVs, all your unstructured data, and we're going to index it and make it to where your ops and engineers teams can find information in a matter of a couple seconds instead of hours or potentially days. And as the concept and the technology started evolving, really realized that augmented search was the foundation for building truly agentic workflows. First thing, we can talk AI all we want, but at the end of the day, it's still a data problem. And you have to have good data ingestion and organization of that data. And then you can start automating workflows. So our first workflow that we've automated is doing regulatory filings for the Texas Railroad Commission, W-10s, forms like this. So the way that it works today is, Texas Railroad Commission will send a notification to an EMP, say, hey, you need to file W-10s on these wells. Engineering team will take that notification. They'll go find the wells in their production systems, get the well files. They'll find the data. Then they enter that data into a W-10, hope that they don't fat finger the data in there, and then send that off. We've automated that process to where Collide can go in and do that in a matter of a few seconds.
Let's do this real quick. Just break this down because I get this a lot. We have Collide.io, which is our knowledge share forum, if you will, community, and we have some tools there for folks to use. But then Collide is also our AI enterprise software offering that we sell to customers.
Yeah, so Collide AI is true enterprise software. This isn't SaaS that you can just pick up off the shelf and run day one. And so, when we deploy in the enterprise, with some of our customers, we're deployed 100% within their Microsoft Azure environment. This is a pretty heavy lift, both from the CapEx that we spend on our core technology and on our deployment teams to get it deployed. And, Blair over at Mercury Fund's been telling everyone that, we're the Palantir of the energy industry. And I think it's actually a pretty good.
That's what Charlie said. Oldest daughter, Charlie, when I was going through what we do, and she goes, oh, you're Palantir for energy.
Yeah. And, you look at Palantir, they have their core product, which is Foundry, and then they have their deployment teams that go in and deploy Foundry into their clients. It's kind of the same thing. We're productizing 80% of Collide AI. As we move into enterprise clients, there's 20% that's custom implementation and integration based on their workflows and fitting it to their workflows. So there's that. But then, you look at this public facing side of the platform, this community and knowledge sharing platform. It's pretty funny because this story used to be really confusing to people a couple of 2 to 3 years ago when I would tell people the vision of having this community-driven platform, because they're like, oh, what? It's like Reddit for oil and gas, but you're doing enterprise AI. Who's helped out a ton with that is Elon Musk, building XAI and Grok off of Twitter. Actually, last week on a phone call, some guy was like, wait, Collin, so are you going to use, your community and the content to make better AI models for oil and gas? He's like, that's very Elon Musk of you. And I was like, hey, to be fair, I came up with this idea before Elon. He's just got a bigger balance sheet than I do. So, with the Collide community platform, there's a couple of thoughts that I have on this. And, I remember one VC asking me last year, he's like, hey, like we're bought into the enterprise, but like the Clyde community, like, is this real? Is this actually needed? And I got pretty defensive about it because this is needed for the industry. And, we do these community onboarding calls every week, and it's so cool listening to them, of listening to why people are coming on and what purpose that it serves. And, the public facing platform, it's free to join. You have to apply. We're trying to keep it extremely high quality of energy professionals. So you have to fill out an application, but it's free to join. And we're going to keep putting money and time and capital into that because I think that it's needed. I think that it's important for the industry, and I feel an obligation to build things that are valuable to, literally our first core value at our company is community over everything. And so I think about how can we deliver value to people and build something that's going to help them. So if I can help one person make a connection that gets a job, or one person that started, I'll give you a real story. Guy got on there and he's like, Collin, he's like, I've heard you talk about Clyde on Twitter. He's like, what finally got me on here is some E&P engineer was asking for a new chemical vendor, and my friend sent it to me. He's like, we're now on the third step of the process of getting them as a client. And he's like, that's why I'm in Clyde. He's like, that's so much value. And so we're doing that to just create this place for engineers and people in the energy industry. And don't get me wrong, we're going to benefit from that too. We're going to be able to build better AI products and AI models that we monetize at the enterprise level based off of data that comes from that. But this is what I love, is that it gives us such aligned incentives of like, hey, look, I don't got to go monetize the community and bombard you with advertisements or things of this nature. We're not going to data mine to send you targeted ads. Like, we just want this to be a place that is such a high value exchange for everyone involved, and then we're going to be able to use that to build better AI products in the future.
And the thing that gets me about that is someone who got fired because we couldn't figure out spacing. I think you've heard this before.
I've never heard why you got fired. I just thought it was because you're a jackass at times, but I've never heard that it was due to well spacing or anything else.
Yeah, well, you're more than welcome to have my former partners on to tell that side of the story. But no, in 2019, we spent $951 million in CapEx across the portfolio, and it was basically all D&C costs because we'd bought our acreage. And if you used end of the year reserves, our IRR on our drilling was 33%. The only problem was, given what we had paid for acreage, we needed about 45%. And so that was, us just taking our lumps on spacing. We literally did it better than anyone else in the industry, but obviously not good enough for me to keep my job.
Yeah.
And my point there is, in hindsight, we should have been going to people, our offset operators, saying, hey guys, let's run a pilot together. Let's share all our data. Let's choose a little bit here so we can all benefit from this.
Yeah.
And we could have been more thoughtful about it.
I'll tell you a couple of anecdotal stories. I'm sitting at a private equity fund, and one of the partners had asked a question like that. He's like, well, Collin, if we invest in Collide, will that keep other private equity firms from participating in the platform? And one of the younger guys there is like, no, you don't get it. It's about open source and collaboration and knowledge sharing. And I asked, it's like, hey, how much capital did your portcos burn trying to figure out well spacing? And, everyone kind of smirked a little bit. It's like, imagine how much more advanced the industry would be, and all boats will rise with the tide if we're sharing best practice on operational challenges. Like, there is not a lot that is proprietary in shale anymore. And so now it's about operational efficiency. And, the other thing that I think about too is, I was at another private equity fund, and they're like, at the end, they're like, hey, sometimes we get calls from our portcos, and, they're having a really bad operation and fishing. And by the time they're calling us, it's pretty bad because we're finance bros. We're not helpful to this, but it's more so about like, hey, how much money do we want to spend on this? He's like, and what we do is we get all of our portfolio company management teams together, and we get on a conference call and just like, hey, what happened up to this point? What are potential avenues forward? And he's like, be a perfect conversation to happen in the Collide forums. And so that's really what the idea is for the Collide community is sharing information on operational challenges. These aren't things that are proprietary. And
you can't arbitrage them. I mean, if you figured out how to get wells on back online instead of in 15 days and 9 days, you're not going to go buy a property because you can do that better and make any significant money. But we all benefit if you share that with everybody.
I think what's interesting is that this is the way that the industry's, I mean, you go back to the great crew change with millennials taking leadership positions, like this mindset is shifting. I mean, and I'm not even going to say from millennials, I'll take it. One of our clients on the enterprise for Collide AI, very, storied oil man, and in his 60s, maybe 70s. I don't know his age. And even he's kind of given the nod of like, hey, someday I may be willing to anonymize our data if it goes to the, a collective pool of others that are.
And cut my software bill.
Give me a discount. Yeah. And so I think that this idea of collaboration and knowledge sharing is actually gaining a lot of steam, and a lot of that's being driven by the great crew change. But so that's a big thing for me, is just this collaborative open source mindset and building a platform where people can come build their network and find opportunity. Where we got the name Collide for the app, some people think that it's after Collin, and it's not. It's actually never even dawned on me that it looked like my name. But when we did events for digital wildcatters, we had a thesis around collisions and removing friction. You'd go to these old oil and gas conferences and they're just stuffy and stale, and it's awkward to walk up to a group of 5 people on a showroom floor and talk to them. And so our whole thesis around events was how could we make them a low friction environment, make it like a party where you'd inject content into it and make it in a really close environment to where you had to bump into people. And that was kind of the culture was hey, it's all right to just talk to random people. And anyways, those collisions that would happen between people were the catalyst for collaboration and ideas and opportunity. I can't tell you how many stories I have from our events of people doing deals, people, partnering up on businesses, people getting jobs from running into other people at our events. And so that's what we wanted to do in a digital environment with Collide, is give this a place where people could have those collisions and interactions. And, the other part of it too is I saw that people in this industry didn't have a good way to actually show their true ability and skill. And so you'd look at the software engineering industry, and if you want to hire someone, it's hey, send me your GitHub, take this coding test. You had proof of work that you could do to see if someone was actually a good software engineer. You didn't have that ability in oil and gas. All you had was a static resume that said, hey, Susie worked at Pioneer for 5 years and Endeavor for 3 years, but that doesn't actually tell you anything about someone's true ability and skill. And so what we started doing was building out, spending a lot of time on user profiles so that people could develop a dynamic resume. So you can get on there and you can see you earn points for all of your contributions. They're called watts. They're little lightning bolts. So every time that you make a post, you like something, you comment, you get watts. And now Susie goes to apply for a job at Diamondback. Diamondback can say, oh, hey, she worked at, Pioneer for this many years, Endeavor for this many years, but man, she's got 1 million watts in Collide. She has a ton of social proof and validation from her peers. She's super involved in the community. You go see a history of her post. And so it gives you this much more qualitative element to base, someone's true ability and skill than just a static resume. And so it's something that I'm super passionate about, is that part of the platform, because I think that it's so needed in the industry. But all that does is help fuel our enterprise AI product. And, I don't think that there's a lot of companies out there that are truly community driven. And I think now that, Grok and XAI exist, that it's a pretty good analogy of using Twitter and the user generated content to train better models. It's something, similar that we'll execute on. And so that's how we think about the whole platform coming together.
So chat through AI enterprise software. What are we doing there? What are we thinking there?
Yeah. I wrote a blog post on this the other day that enterprise AI is hard. I saw a Silicon Valley founder get on Twitter and talk about how they were pivoting their business after 3 months. They were no longer building enterprise AI because it's too hard. And it is. I mean, these are very, very non-trivial things that we're doing. I don't know if you saw this MIT report that came out a few days ago.
I haven't read it yet. I just read the journal article about it.
So, just kind of the short version of it is they said that they surveyed all these companies and 95% of enterprise AI pilots are failing. And most of these pilots are internal teams that are trying to build with GPT and Copilot, and they're just not finding success. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about originally, is that large language models just wouldn't be good at the enterprise level because you can't solve for that last mile problem. Like, yeah, you'll see like flashes of brilliance and like, oh man, it'd be cool, like if you could do this, but it can just never quite get you there. And so you also look at that report and it showed that the companies that were working with vertical specific AI vendors like Collide are having 65% success. So I have a deep belief that vertical AI platforms are going to win. Like, you're going to have your foundation models, and platforms like us will use those foundation models within our, we use GPT and Claude and all these different technologies that are out there. But when it comes to vertical AI, you have to have deep domain expertise to understand the problems that the industry deals with. Our team has really deep domain expertise in oil and gas. We understand these problems. And so what we're doing when we go in is, we're really focused on operations teams and upstream and now in midstream. And so there's a couple different applications. Let's talk about a few of them. One E&P is using it to extract terms out of their midstream contracts.
The other thing they're doing that I think is really cool is he gets the biggest problem with midstream contracts when you're an E&P company is what acreage is dedicated where.
Yeah.
And so gets the drilling schedule, goes in and says this location, which contract is it dedicated to? Oh, boom. Because this company, I believe, has 35, 40 midstream contracts, marketing contracts. Oh, it's dedicated here. Then he looks at the rate and says, okay, that's a pretty good rate. We're good. Or he sees the rate and he goes, man, that's not a very good rate. I should get an exception. It's not going to be profitable for them to lay a line to me, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And the way he used to do that is literally conference room table, all 35 marketing contracts open to Exhibit A, where it has the designated acreage or dedicated acreage.
Yeah.
And, you go, where is it?
Yeah.
So,
And you think there's so many workflows and problems like that where they're just extremely inefficient, and it's actually not value add for the subject matter expert to do that work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's actually like, I think this is a big, we should talk about this more in depth later, but everyone talks about AI taking jobs, and I just do not see that as the future, especially in our industry. I see Collide as augmenting teams to allow them to focus on the important work. Take all the trivial.
Someone that knows how to do your job with AI is going to take your job, not AI.
It's a fair statement. And so you look at, that midstream contracts, people are using it for general well file search. Like, hey, give me, I'll tell an anecdotal story. An engineer at a big E&P was like, man, I get handed this well. I've got 2 fish in the hole. It's got all these problems. I have to give a recommendation on next steps, but I have no historical context of what's happened in this well. So I go spend 2 days going through WellView, going through email chains, going through Microsoft Teams, just trying to paint a picture of what's happened in this well. He's like, if Clyde could tell me the story of that well, it'd save me 2 days of work. And so some people are using it for, well file search of like, hey, give me, a summary of this well, hey, what ESP's out on that well? Who provided the wellhead? Just being able to ask questions and query data really quickly. We have a mineral fund that's working with us on extracting data out of their revenue statements and matching that against other accounting and production systems. We have an E&P that is using it to find double invoicing and invoicing discrepancies. And then, you look at like ProFrac, ProFrac's using it to upskill their field engineers. You can be out in the field and you say, hey, you can ask anything. It could be, how do I prepare a pump for downtime in cold weather? And boom, in 2 seconds, Clyde AI will take all of ProFrac's internal data and documents and return an answer. Say, hey, this is how you need to prepare a pump for downtime. If it's short term, less than 12 hours, here's what you need to do if it's longer than 12 hours. And then hyperlinks to the citations, and you can click on them, and boom, it'll open up ProFrac's standard operating procedure right there in the window. And so those are the types of applications that we're working on. And, I think if you...
One thing that I've noticed, that a point I want to make, because when we're out there selling software, we have to do two things. We have to level set where the technology is today, but then we also have to sell what we can do in the future, where this is going. And I think level setting the technology today, you have your well search. I also think at this point, AI does a good job of showing you correlation, not necessarily causation. It's not telling you why, but it can have things. And my great anecdotal story is I have a room of 15 people. You're going to hate this as, I guess, chief revenue officer. Being a good software salesman is kind of like being a lawyer. You don't ask a question unless you know the answer. I've kind of thrown caution to the wind. So, and a geophysicist...
Chuck self liability for us.
Right, exactly. Don't tell HR. No, but a geophysicist asks a very thoughtful question. She goes, Chuck, you're telling me I'm the subject matter expert. You're telling me that AI is allowing me to get my answers quickly, but you're also telling me that when I connect disparate data sources, I find relationships that even me, the subject matter expert, didn't know existed, and I can't wrap my head around that. And I said, why don't we try it? So I had a database of 6 wells, and I just went in and said, how would we compare and contrast all these wells? And hit enter, not knowing what it was going to do. Well, it was really cool. It came back and it said, well, you could look at casing design. You could look at completion recipe. You could look at formation. You could look at, where it's located. It also came back and said, I would compare EUR and IP30 by the different vendors that worked on the well. And I mean, back at Kane, I did 125 early stage assets, kind of lease and drills.
Yeah.
Never once did I sit there and go, is company A better at fracking than company B? We looked at the recipe and compared recipes with each other. And so the geophysicist went, oh, I see what you're saying. I should go look at that. I've never really looked at that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the cool thing too. It's not just search. It's if you can ask a question, get an answer really quickly, you ask 47 questions instead of 5.
Yeah.
And that 43rd question may be a rabbit hole that's totally worth exploring.
Yeah, increases bandwidth and allows us to do work that was previously uneconomic to do. I was talking to one E&P, they want to use our document generation on their workover procedures. And he's like, man, if you can generate our workover procedures, we get to move to a 4-day work week. It's like, but not only that, it's like we can put so much more information in our workover procedures than what we do now, but it's just too much of a burden for our engineering teams to do it. And so I think what AI is really good at right now is being able to search across a large volume and just vast data set, and it's able to find those correlations like you mentioned. But this is where the magic happens to make that happen. For us, it's so funny. Like when people are talking shit to me on Twitter, like, oh, you're a GPT rapper. I'm like, actually, if we're anything, we're an Azure rapper. You're going to call us anything, at least get it right. Like you have no clue what you're talking about. But where our magic sauce happens is in our data pipelines, how we process data and documents, how we ingest that, how it gets stored, and ultimately how we have really accurate retrieval of that information. Because, people, the question that I get a lot when I go into like an E&P or OFS company is, why can't I just do this with Copilot or GPT? And it's a very fair question. And there's a couple of different things. One, big tech cannot move into these industry-specific niche workflows. And just like we talked about earlier in that MIT review, is that 95% of AI pilots that are built internally with these tools are failing. And even if you just look at like basic search, I mean, there's so much just research being done on what's called context stuffing. And so context stuffing is essentially like, hey, can I just use a large language model, like GPT, and put all my documents in it and search across it? And I do this all the time with Claude. I'll put in, legal contracts into Claude, but I'm talking like, 3, 4, 5 contracts, not thousands of documents. Our first pilot that we ever did was 20,000 PDFs. You're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages of technical documentation. And to do this is where you have to use retrieval augmented generation and have these data pipelines where you're embedding documents and storing that in a vectorized database. And then, it's not just, one form of search. There's multiple methodologies that we're stacking on top of each other when it comes to search. So these are really intricate systems that we're building. But that's the thing, is that once you get data stored and processed and the ability to query it, that's what sets the future for these truly agentic workflows to be able to retrieve information and use it. But yeah, to your point, it's like, hey, now instead of asking 5 questions, you can ask 50. You're still the subject matter expert at the end of the day. And you know what information that you're looking for, but instead of having to go thumb through, potentially even a physical well file, you can just query the system and find it. And so, I think that all the value in AI today sits in search and then being able to find weird correlations. One question that I get from all the old timer CEOs is like, okay, so can this AI tell me how to drill the best well we've ever drilled? And I always laugh. And I tell them, I'm like, hey, not yet. And when it does, I'm going to charge you a lot more money for it. But what it can do today is your engineer can sit there and be like, hey, what was the highest producing well in this section? Okay, it was this well. All right, hey, what casing design did they use? What frac design did they use? What type of proppant? How much proppant?
Was it a parent well? Was it a child well?
And you can ask all of these questions, and as long as it has access to that data, it can get you the answers really quickly and get you to that point of like, okay, hey, what does the optimal well design look like for this well? And so, I think that that's really how it needs to be thought about and utilized by different teams and companies.
Because it's augmented search. It's my twist on that is it's finding correlations. We're generating documents today, like you said, with the regulatory filings. I'm sure we're going to build somebody's workover procedures sooner rather than later. What are we guesstimating in the future? You can go first, then I'll go. So 6 months, a year.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the AI industry, it is moving so fast, weekly. I mean,
my answers have changed. Me out selling software, my answers have literally changed in a month.
Yeah, I mean, new models, new technologies, new methodologies get dropped every single week. That's where a large amount of our time and
6 months ago, if you would have said, can it handle handwriting? I would have said, nah, can't do it. Today, it does. If
you were like us building retrieval augmented generation 18 months to 24 months ago, like you were in the early stages of it, and the whole idea of RAG has evolved into, going from these kind of rudimentary systems to very intricate purpose-built systems. And I think, I can't predict, where the industry is going as a whole, but I can predict where we're going is, where's a lot of our time and money and R&D going to be spent? It's going to be in some of our back-end technology. So automating a lot of our data pipelines, like our document classification, fine-tuning our embedding models based on specific types of documents, things of that nature, to where we can really streamline data ingestion and get even higher accuracy on that. Having agentic orchestration, fine tuning, let's say that we fine tune an instance of Llama 3.5 on land and title, and it's just really good on that thing. And a user asks a question on land and title, it knows to go route through that land and title model and has, the workflows that are associated with that. So getting into agentic orchestration. And then one thing I get really excited about is the computer vision capability of the system. What you just brought up is like the handwriting. I mean, it's cool that, you can take a old handwritten lease and title and be like, hey, who's the signer on this? And boom, it'll tell you the name. And it pulled that from a cursive signature. One example I like to give is, this is even in our early days, which just kind of blew my mind, was I asked a question on one of our clients' data sets, and in the answer, it returned a picture. And the picture was of a server rack, and it had like 3 computers on the server rack, and each one of those computers had a serial number on it. It was like into 978, into 979. And I just typed in, I did a new query and I typed in into 979, and it was able to go find that picture within all that data.
Yeah.
I was like, shit. It's like, think about the future of being able to query information on your, surface equipment or well equipment, by bringing in picture data. One of our clients or potential clients has a WhatsApp channel where they take pictures of every ESP that's ran downhole, every piece of equipment, and it just sits in these WhatsApp chats. And I was like, man, we bring that into Clyde and start indexing that. And now you can search, it's multimodal. It's not just text, but it's across pictures and charts and graphs and well schematics, things of this nature. That's where it gets really powerful. Like, I think, what's cool is the way that we're building these automated workflows is you can get a quick ROI associated with that in due time. But really where these systems become powerful is as you connect everything. What random piece of insight are you going to find from that, through the correlation of tying in, well files with production systems.
With
and,
safety.
Yeah, with safety.
Yeah.
Safety's, I've been thinking about safety a lot lately, and how do we actually make a clean user experience that is actually valuable to people in the field to make the operations safer. And so, yeah, these are all just very complex things, both from the underlying technology and then how do you make a product that is actually loved by the people that are using it. And these things can't happen in silos. Like, you could have the best performing technology of all time, but if your product sucks from a user experience perspective, it'll never get used. And so we have to put a lot of time and brain power into both design and how we build things and how they look and how they operate, and then the underlying technology as well. So
I think what we're going to see are these little bots based on different disciplines. So like if you're finance pro or you're ops guy or whoever, that just automate a lot of the 15 things you do a day that are copying and pasting, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
I think those are going to happen automatically in the background, and you're not even going to be thinking that it's AI.
Yeah.
It's literally just happening for you. So I think that's going to happen. I think the second thing that's going to happen, and you've alluded to this, is a lot of data is going to be anonymized and shared. I think we're going to see when we're going to build well failure bot, and I know I'm the master marketer here, so I will come up with a better name than well failure bot. I mean, we'll get some snazzy name, but yeah, I think folks will get to the point where they're all sharing that information. They're participating in those bots, and we'll get a lot better for that. But it's going to be wild all it can do in terms of just the mundane stuff we do every day.
Yeah.
The one worry I have, and this is, I'm going to kill a lot of brain cells on this, is we need the old crusty people that, the guy or gal that could put their hand on the machine and go, here's what's wrong.
Yeah.
You became that person because of all the grunt work you did. And the one thing I do worry about is automating the grunt work. How are we going to develop the old crusty guy and gal?
How do you capture that intuition and tribal knowledge? I mean, look, at the end of the day, when I wrote this white paper for Clyde way back in the day, 2020, 2021, I talked about the biggest problem in the industry was knowledge retention and transfer. And that has several different facets to it. The first facet is that the gray hairs are leaving and taking a ton of tribal knowledge with them. Every room that you're in, there's that old guy in the corner that just knows everything. And he can put up a wrench to a wellhead and tell you what's happening downhole by, just listening to the vibrations. And so you have that element. Second facet is operational teams work in silos within companies. So like in an E&P, for example, drilling doesn't talk to completions doesn't talk to production. The person that drilled the well 5 years ago is no longer there. So you go to work over the well, you have no contextual understanding of what they saw. Just go down the list of the bad communication that happens between departments. And then on the M&A process, I see this a lot at E&Ps. You'll go acquire an asset, and you just get data dumped, a large volume of well files, none of it standardized. We have some clients that just have terabytes of data sitting on-prem on their servers from acquisitions that they have no idea what's even in there. And so you have all this knowledge loss that's lost in that data, and then lost because maybe some of the team doesn't come over with that asset too, right? And so you see this across the board. And I think
Silicon Valley doesn't believe it when we tell them that we use less than 1% of the data we have.
no, because you think about it, dude. Look, get on my phone, get on your phone, look at Facebook, look at Instagram, look at Twitter, look at YouTube. They track every single little movement. They're watching your eyes, they're watching your mouse, they watch how long you hover over some link, and they're just constantly processing and crunching data for what? To serve you the best ad that they can.
Yeah.
Does this actually make the world a better place? No. Then you come into industries like oil and gas, energy, and medical that just throw away data and don't use any data and could use all of this data to make the world a better place. And so we have big tech over here on one end of the spectrum that is, just they do not let a piece of data get through the system without it being crunched, utilized, and leveraged. And then you have this other side of the spectrum, which are the industries that actually run the world that don't utilize any of the data that we have. And that is a problem that has to be solved just for humanity and society, is that these legacy industries have to get better on these things and do that. And, I think kind of going back to, the gray hairs leaving is, I think about this problem all the time is how do you extract that tribal knowledge and domain expertise out of people's heads? This is what I really geek out on within a company is how can we go in there and create this deep brain or this internal knowledge base? And, talking to like some of the engineering firms that do reserve reports, like it's as easy as, hey, when you're sitting there creating type curves in a reserve report, screen record and walk through
a podcast.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story here in a second on that comment, but screen record your workflow. And hey, Susie's recording and Susie says, hey, this is why I use this B factor. And 12 months later, when that engineering firm goes to pick up that well again, they can open it up and they'd be like, hey, why did Susie use that B factor? And they don't have to sit there and guess. They can just query the system. And it's like, oh, Susie used this B factor because she said she, did this, this, and this. Yeah. I was talking to a senior ops person at a big offshore E&P. And he's like, we have an incident out in the Gulf of Mexico. We have our entire incident reporting process that we go through. And we do that, it gets filed away. And he's like, but you know what we don't have? We don't have just a conversation with a 30-year experienced drilling superintendent of like, hey, what are your thoughts? Like, what do you think that we did wrong here? What could we have done better? And he's like sitting there talking to me. He's like, honestly, dude, this sounds just like a podcast. Like we should be recording a podcast on
Voice to text is so good.
It's so good. And that's why I told the story earlier of us recording or trying to transcribe our podcast with AI, because I've seen that firsthand of how much better voice to text is today than it was back in 2018.
We record all our meetings and, we send them out at the end of each week and you can get in there and query it. And it's good enough where I can say, what did Collin mean by this?
Yeah, you get a summary. Here at Clyde, we record all of our meetings. And so at the end of the week, I get a summary. Hey, what's happening across engineering? What's happening across product? What's happening across sales? And so, we don't just build AI first products. The way that we're building it is AI first as well. And, really like what my focus on is I care a lot about talent density. So how can I get the best people in the world to work at our company and then augment them with AI? So I don't think that it's good to use headcount as a good KPI for the health of a company anymore. You should be looking at talent density and how can you get the best people, comp them well, and then increase their bandwidth and their throughput with AI. And in oil and gas and E&Ps, I think this is how do you take 60 to 70% of their work that's very trivial, searching for information, then copy and pasting information and generating a report and automate that so that they can actually focus on the high impact decisions that move the needle and increase revenue or decrease costs. And so that's what the focus should be.
Because you and I kind of, and speaking of the urologist, I have to pee, so we'll wrap this up. But You and I think about this a little differently in terms of how we quantify the market size. You think of, kind of G&A and what percent of savings we can have or something. I actually think there are kind of three buckets. You basically have CapEx spend, and we can definitely make CapEx spend better. We can drill better wells, get pumps back online faster. Then there's risk mitigation, whether that's making safety better, whether that's just flat out the amount of insurance we have to pay, actual cash outlays for it, marketing, hedging, et cetera. And then there's also the enabling of the workforce, and whether that's saving money or allowing you to do more with less.
Well, that's what, so many people look at it as a zero-sum game of AI is going to take away, but almost all technology enables us to do more. Some people don't know, the story of the Luddites, but literally blood was shed because automation was coming to textiles and manufacturing. Like, oh, they're taking our jobs. The robots are taking our jobs. And literally had a little skirmish and revolution over this where people died over it. And what you come to find out is that, we go from hand-sewn garments to, we produce so many clothes in the world now that just end up in landfills. And like, automation just allowed us to make more clothes. And
my favorite's always the third world countries where somebody's winning, wearing the Kansas City Super Bowl winner,
Yeah. And you look at that applied to oil and gas. For example, one of our clients always has 60 wells that sit offline in perpetuity. And they just never have the engineering hours to get over to them. And they have 5 to 10 well failures every week. And so all their engineering hours go to those new well failures because they're higher producing wells. What if you can free up engineers' time to where they can go focus on those 60 wells that are offline? Now you get those wells back online and you're producing more, revenues going up. And so really looking at it through this, and I'm sure it was same in finance back in the day with like Excel and
dude, Lotus 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Like I'm sure that you had the same exact conversations.
I tell our coders, dude, I coded back in the day. Lotus 1, 2, 3.
No, for real.
It was all keystrokes.
Yeah.
So it was simple coding.
No, for real it was. And I guarantee, you were there, but I guarantee, you go back and there was that same type of conversation. But in all reality, what those programs allowed us to do is just do more deals and bigger deals and more complex deals. And so I think AI is the same exact way. It's just going to increase our volume and throughput, and we'll be able to do work that was previously uneconomic.
So now that I have a job, I think what we're going to do is rebrand this Chuck Yates Got a Job.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about AI. Kind of every week, just different aspects of it. Because, it's crazy. Like you said, we need to talk about data and how you get your data in shape. We need to talk about data security and all the issues there. And it's literally changing enough each week that I think I'm going to have, chock full of content on this.
Yeah. No, the industry's moving quickly. What I'm really proud of the oil and gas industry is being a quick adopter. This is the first time ever I've seen a digital technology been adopted like this. And I think that it's just because everyone sees what can be done with ChatGPT.
It's a game. It's enough of a game changer. That's what I've always said. The oil and gas business, when it's a game changer, like drilling a 3-mile lateral and a 97 stage frac, we do it, and we do it technologically as sophisticated as anything.
We do it fast. Yeah.
Because it's a game changer. If it's not a game changer,
it's just picking up pennies. Yep. So all right, cool, man.
All right. I'll have you back maybe in December. Give me my performance review. Might be a little brutal, but I'm willing to
performance review.
I'm willing to put it on.
All right, sounds good.
All right.